This plenary is on protests during COVID, and I can't think of anything more dire or urgent right now. Our moderator for this is Rafael Shimunov. He is Director of Creative and Social Media Strategy at the Center for Popular Democracy, and he's one of the most creative people I know. You may have seen the video that he made superimposing Ellen DeGeneres giving a defense of George W. Bush in front of the human rights abuses of Abu Ghraib. Or maybe you've just seen him on Twitter a lot. I certainly loved his creative designs for the Working Families Party, and I've always appreciated his leadership in the Jews of Color Caucus for Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. He is a Queens boy all the way, and he's moderating this panel because when it comes to creativity, he's my guy. Rafael, take it away.
Thank you, Alana. What an amazing backstory of how this started. And I learned also a lot from Brett, who was mentioned earlier by Charles. And this is such an exciting panel to me because the things that are going to come out of here today from the very special speakers we have are things that are going to seed a new way of how we engage our work and maintain being effective. COVID, it's a monster. It's empowered not by its viralness as much as it is by our existing inequities that predated COVID, from large and small. Today, for example, it forces us to ask what the role of government is, the economy, and it's going around the country, the world, pouring gasoline on existing fires that we made. Well, not we made, but that our oppressors made. And such as like school to prison pipeline, voter suppression, healthcare, and also in our homes, like in our workplaces, the smallest things that were unfair at work, or even the large things unfair at work, are now things that are used to be under the rug are now out there and exploding. Healthcare, wage theft, like all of those things are now on steroids. And at home too, like let's not forget, domestic violence is up, child abuse is up. All of the things that we have not dealt with as a society are now exploding in a way where inaction is impossible, but it's wrestling with this time when inaction is kind of encouraged because it's keeping us safe. Like being home is keeping us safe. So how do we stay effective? How do we make sure our voices are heard and confront the halls of power and disrupt systems while we're also protecting each other with a social distance campaign that protects our health? So a lot of people on this panel are going to talk about the things they're doing. I'm so excited to introduce them. They're like my heroes. And also other things happening outside in terms of really what are acts of survival. Like it's not just advocacy for many people. More and more, as it been had for some communities like immigrants, POC, and other oppressed communities, it's always been acts of survival. And now we're seeing people considering their own survival even more beyond the conventionally oppressed groups. So now we need to show what is possible. And they are. Right now, the Amazon strikers, the Instacart workers who had coalitions pump up their work, coalitions like Athena, who made sure that that work wasn't in vain, where their own work coming out in real life and showing up for themselves and their rights is also paired with our work, lifting that up. And in many cases, we are them and they are us. There's people on this panel who are also first frontline workers, essential workers, or groups like in California, in LA, ACCE, Alliance for Californians and Community Empowerment, who helped with the Reclaim LA work, which was homeless people being told, people without homes, being told that they have to stay in, that they have to stay 6 feet apart, that they have to do social distancing, but they have no home. So what they did was take homes that were vacant. And what workers like this and people on this call who are interested in in promoting this work and dreaming up new ways to do this work, it was because of them that they are protected right now, because the world is watching. If the police go in and drag them out, the world is watching. So all of the good stuff here you're going to learn are people led. They're led by the people who are at risk the most. And as you know, all the essential workers from grocery stores to hospitals to everywhere right now are people of color, immigrants, who are leading this. And it's our responsibility to kind of follow that lead and think of ways to make it even more powerful. So I'm going to start to introduce some folks. Just quickly, I'm going to just list the names of our panel, just so you know who's going to be with us. Sia Weaver of Housing Justice for All and many, many other things. Nene Taylor of DC Black Lives Matter and many, many other things. Stephen Lurie of Never Again Action and many, many other things. And Nadine Block of Beautiful Trouble and many other things. And specifically with Nadine, including studying all the many other things that many people on this panel are doing so that many other people can do many more things. So this is exciting. I can't wait to get started. And I think the first panelist I'd love to talk to is Sia of Housing Justice for All. And I hope she could join and introduce herself.
Hey, can you see me? Okay, hi. My name is Sia. Thank you so much for having me and thank you for the introduction. I am the campaign coordinator of Housing Justice for All, which is a statewide coalition of over 70 groups that represent tenants, public housing residents, and homeless New Yorkers in their struggle to eliminate evictions, eliminate homelessness, and expand public and social housing in New York State.
And is there, like right now, when people are asking you, how are you pivoting? How are you changing up what you're doing? How are you not ignoring what needs to be done? Like, what's your thing right now that you're working on that you've just finished that you would love for us to hear about?
Yeah. So it's a really incredible moment for the housing justice movement. We have been saying for a long time in the housing justice community that everyone is just one major life event away from an eviction or from homelessness. And we've known that to be true in our housing community for some time. But what's happening right now, I think everybody liked living in the security that, sorry, my cat is joining us. That's an interesting digital new world. Everyone has lived in the security thinking that didn't really mean them. But this is a really incredible time to be in the housing movement because that life event is happening to everybody all at once. And while that is terrifying because of the magnitude of the crisis, it's also the potential for organizing in the housing field right now is incredible because nobody can pay the rent. And we're realizing en masse just how inadequate our housing policy framework is. So in the last 2-3 weeks, the number of people who subscribe to Housing Justice for All and turn to us for action has grown from, it's 70 organizations, it's a coalition, so we don't have our own base, but the number of people who have turned to those 70 organizations has grown by over 250 times. Our mailing list has expanded faster than I can even put numbers on. And so it's been a really interesting moment to pivot to digital work.
And I guess I'm thinking my neighbors, my friends, in terms of rents and mortgages, right now, folks feel alone. And scared that if they do take action like this, that they would just be hung out to dry and they would be all alone. And to me, it seems as if we are now suddenly people who do the in real life juxtapose work with digital and organizing have kind of a major responsibility right now in our hands, where we're sort of one of the few channels of communication that exists to make them feel like they're part of something larger and protected and informed.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'm hearing people on the street who are saying, I'm just not going to pay rent, and not thinking through maybe like the implications of that, or being cheered by someone with a poster or text to just not pay their rent. But because of the digital work, I see that they can be part of a larger society of people not paying rent or rent striking, or organizing around the inability to pay rent or mortgages. So I was wondering, like, it's renter led, I imagine, from what I understand, with 70 housing organizations. How do you make sure that connection is there? Like, what tools are you using to help folks understand that they're part of something larger and people are watching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, before COVID-19, we were fighting for what we're calling a New York Homes Guarantee, which is I have a sign right behind me here, but the idea that everyone in New York, the richest state and the richest country in the world, should be able to have a guaranteed home. There's 92,000 homeless New Yorkers. Our public housing is in immense disrepair, and 5.5 million New Yorkers are living really just one landlord whim away from an eviction. So we built that network to run that campaign. And so in a lot of ways, we're an organization that's very well positioned across the entire state to provide like pretty hyper-local resources to people who are struggling to pay the rent in this moment. And so we were able to very quickly pivot to doing digital organizing to meet the COVID moment. So what we are calling for is we're calling to cancel rent and cancel mortgages and reclaim our homes. And so that is, I would say, two main things. One is like urgently cancel the rent and freeze rent so that people are not, and that means that not only do you not have to pay now, you won't ever have to pay these months later, because we know that the economic fallout of this crisis will last far longer than the public health threat. And then the second part of that, the reclaiming our homes, really speaks to what you talked about in your opening about ACE. There's many vacant homes in the state, and there are many homeless people. And if we are not doing the work to match, a colleague of mine calls it homeless people with peopleless houses, we are failing. And that already, that juxtaposition of like the vacant luxury buildings and the 92,000 homeless New Yorkers was already such a stark reminder of how our system is broken. It's even more stark right now. So what are we doing to make this possible? The first thing we did is we launched a petition to close housing court. We were able to win that in just a couple days. From there, we moved on to a petition, to like a digital petition to cancel rent and reclaim our homes. We had to quickly like enumerate those demands and pivot. And that petition has done very well as well. And then we are pivoting from there to like, after you sign the petition, we want you to tell your story. So we really are trying to create this online community of people who can't pay rent because of COVID. We've built a digital story map. So when you tell us your story, it's a very simple Google form, and you like upload a picture of yourself. It populates into a map of New York State, so you can see other people on your block and in your neighborhood who are doing and struggling with the exact same thing. And then after people tell their story, we're also putting those stories on many different digital platforms: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We've got a closed Facebook group for people to share their experiences of like talking to their landlord about how they can't pay the rent right now. So trying to really use these digital platforms to create, digital communities of people who can't pay the rent together. And then, this is all building up, of course, to the fact that, on April 1st, we couldn't pay the rent, but on May 1st, we're not going to pay the rent. And the goal of this rent strike, and it's a little different than a traditional rent strike. In a traditional rent strike, and I'll talk about that a little bit too, is you're organizing your building with your neighbors together. You're knocking on people's doors. You have a shared target. That's your landlord. It requires trust, solidarity, deep commitment to one another. Really important. Right now, what we're doing is a little bit different, but, based in the same idea. It's that you can't pay your rent, I can't pay my rent. That's very scary. The cost of inaction is high. It will be safer if we're doing that together. So we're trying to create an online community of people who can't pay their rent together, who've taken a pledge to not pay their rent together. And that's the idea behind the May 1st rent strike. I'll stop there. I guess the last thing I would say, and it's a little bit of a lesson, I guess, as a in real life organizer, not a digital organizer, because that's I'm not really a digital organizer, but we're all learning new skills. We all know, organizers always say that you need many different outreach methods. You need to go knock on people's doors. You need to flyer at the subway stations. You need to meet people outside of housing court. There's a lot of different ways to meet people, and there's no one outreach tool that you rely on. And if you rely on one, you're probably not going to get the biggest breadth of constituents that you need in order to win your campaign. The same is true for digital organizing. So we're using Action Network, you're using Twitter, we're using Facebook. We built a text bot where you can text a number to say that you're having trouble paying your rent, and it texts with you for like 3 or 4, there's 3 or 4 automatic texts it texts you before it passes you off to a real organizer who will talk to you about your rent strike. So the same thing is true. And it's been interesting to see like who uses Facebook is different from who uses Twitter, is different than who wants to text with us, is different than who wants to fill out like an online petition. And all forms matter of outreach.
It's like that old adage of like going where people are in terms of even digital, that every audience is somewhere. And the most successful thing is going to where people are. And in particular with people on the first wave of not being able to pay rent and this and that, mobile is very, very important. And I really appreciate you sharing today. The one thing it reminds me of just creatively is how it's sort of like if you walk into Times Square, normally you would see all of these ads blinking all over the place. And now it seems like a lot of the static is out of the way. And we're all able to really have this opportunity to focus on what's important, both in our personal lives and also in how to organize. And there are very stark visuals out there of homeless people, houseless people in parking lots where they're painted like parking spaces for them to sleep, for people to sleep on, not even socially distant apart, literally in front of an empty hotel, or literally in front of an empty building that could easily be home. Or the hotels around the country right now turning on their lights in the shape of hearts in order to like virtue signal about like how appreciative they are for frontline workers. Yet those rooms are empty, and yet they just fired most of their staff. And yet, frontline workers are actually the people that they're excluding from living in their hotel, because the definition of frontline workers are many people, more than just people working in healthcare, including grocers, your bodega worker, your delivery person, drivers. So, Sia, I really appreciate that. Our next panelist is Nene Taylor of DC Black Lives Matter. Nene coordinates the Mass Engagement Rapid Response Pod. She organizes strategic and consistent mobilizations to prevent racist and oppressive abuse. A lot of actions, more than I can list here. What's really coming up is a lot of the Mama's Day Bailout in DC and DMV, the police murder campaign of Terrence Sterling, and generally like beautiful creative actions that I can't wait to ask Nene about. Nene, maybe you could introduce a little bit about yourself and your work right now.
Hey, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm a co-organizer with Black Lives Matter DC, which is a radical collective. We are infrastructure builders, strategists from the future, but we're here and now making change by dismantling white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, imperialism, anything that oppress our people. We out here dismantling it every day. I'm also a co-organizer with Life After Release, where we work and we bring the reentry of the Black women who are in prison, which the numbers are going up every day. And Life After Release is led by a impacted Black woman who's an executive director who served time in those prisons and know what it's like. So she built a world where she has a reentry program where she teaches those who come back into our community, who are our loved ones, how to get started back again by giving them housing, teaching them organizing skills and strategies to go fight legislations and policies that oppress them. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work liberating our people. And
of course, I am reading your whole bio, and the amount of work you're doing is amazing. It's superhuman, to be honest. Right now, in terms of like the creative of making people notice things, making people see things, even during this kind of lockdown, what is something creative out there that you have worked on? I've heard about the wheat pasting. I've heard about a bunch of things. I'd love to learn, like, what was your process and the group's process in kind of brainstorming and thinking of ways to break through our current limitations and get your organizing out there?
Well, right now, the main thing that we're working on right now is that our loved ones are in cages right now with COVID, and they already were subjected to inhuman situations by having to live in a cage. But right now, while they're in those cages, there's no way to social distance. So every day the numbers are going up in these prisons and in these halfway houses. And so no new jails, Black Lives Matter and DC Mutual Aid, we got together and we like, no, they got to free them all. They have to go, because every day these people were not sentenced to death. They were sentenced to serve a time. And right now they're in those cells sentenced to death. So we got a caravan. And yesterday Thursday was Emancipation Day. So for 2 days straight, 2 caravans we done. One when it first started, we just got cars together, and both times it's been over 100 cars. And we rode through the cities, going to these locations where these people are held in cages, and demanded that they're released, and bringing attention to actually going to some of that, bypassing some of the people who can make the decisions to release them houses, and just going through the city with Free 'em All and the signs, and bringing awareness to the people in the community that these people are going to die. They're sentenced to death, and that's not what they were charged. Their charges wasn't, you must die. And also, April Goggins, who is one of my comrades, she started a petition for Black Lives Matter DC to address and get signatures. And right now we got over 15,000 signatures demanding the release of these prisoners. And also Kiana Johnson in Prince George's County, we have another online petition demanding the release, where we're contacting the state attorneys, the judges, and the state attorney, judges, and the directors of these prisons, because they're inhumane. They don't have hand sanitizers. They don't have cleaning supplies. They sentenced to death, so we're demanding the release. And so we've done 2 online petitions and have people standing in solidarity with us to let the prisoners to be released, or give them, no, we want them all. We need them all free them all.
And what is an example of something where you've normally done, like in New York, we do have, of course, the same problem. And a lot of the stuff, like, for example, our terrible bail system, where in the first week when someone is just charged, with something before a trial on bail and in jail only because they can't afford to post bond. That first week, that's when most of the suicides happen. That first week is when most of the sexual violence, police violence in the jail happens. That first week, they're losing their mortgage, their affordable housing, their child custody, their immigration status, you name it. And that's all just based on an accusation. And that, again, was not something a judge sentenced, right? So there are things so remarkably broken even prior to COVID, where a judge did not sentence someone to get sexually abused in a cell. And yet we as a society accept those kind of things. And now with COVID, a judge, of course, as you said, did not sentence you to acquire a disease. Literally, like I think in Rikers Island right now in New York, which is our biggest jail, people are contracting COVID at a rate higher than anywhere in the country. And to break through that in New York, there are some creative things happening on the street where people are showing up in front of the jail, taking video and hearing the people who are in that jail speak literally with their voice. What are some creative stuff that you're using right now to visually, or anything that you normally that you're doing new right now in terms of waking folks up? I know, like many of our communities, this is not new. This is something involving our families, our neighbors every day. But for a lot of the people, we need to mobilize, their struggle, and I don't mean no offense by it, but their struggle on Instagram is like, I'm bored at home. I can't go to my yoga class. I can't get my hair fixed, or this or that, which are all like real things, but there is like a difference in how this is affecting some people. Like some of my friends, that's how it's affecting them. My other friends who I grew up with, it's affecting in a more dire way immediately. And how do we reach everybody with these stories? Are you doing things on the street? Are you doing things that are reaching, are trying to reach people that it normally would not reach?
Yeah, right now, actually, Free Black Mamas DMV, this is our 4th year. And so actually every year during this time around Mother's Day, we literally go bail Black mamas out of jail so they can be with their child. But this year it was different because of COVID. And so therefore, in the way that we showing up looked different because of COVID. So we actually have a Twitter now, and we still going out to get these mamas for Mother's Day. But it looks different. Usually we have this whole big campaign where people come out with signs and we meet the people at the jail when we pay the bill. But because of COVID this year, it looks different. So we actually have an online campaign where we asking people to donate. And it's like only like 2 of us would show up at the jail to set bail. And we actually getting pushback even trying to release those. We literally just released an 18-year-old young lady where we had to fight and go all the way up to our county executive and demand that she be released after we gave them $10,000 of our hard cash to get her out of a jail cell. And so they didn't want to release her because of some stipulation that she needed to go to a drug rehab. And that was unacceptable to us. So we had to threaten them with the online petition and the media that if they don't release her after we gave you guys $10,000, because not only did they robbed us of our money, and they put false information out there, because if you read her chat, it says she was released and they was kidnapping her. And so therefore it got all the way up to the county executive, and before 24 hours, they let her out of that cell. And so right now, that's what we're doing. We got the campaign out, asking people to donate, and we literally going to get mothers. It's out of national bailout, because honestly, these people are not charged. They're not actually sentenced. They are pre-trial. They're like people saying that you may have done this. And so therefore, how can they fight their cases inside of a cage? So we go back and we pay a price to end money bails. Money keeping them in, but love is bringing them out. And that's the same thing we're doing for everybody. We're going up to Hope Village, where we got people at the halfway houses here in DC. And we taking caravans up there saying, like, free these people. They serve their time. They literally just waiting for a couple of months to get out. And so we're doing a lot of online petitioning and showing it digitally online with slides. DC Mutual Aid is out there pushing the work. And so it's getting out there and it's making a difference, because actually Halfway House, we just found out 160 people at the Halfway House that we did the protest at are being released. Incredible work. I think everyone should look up like Black Mamas Bailout and the National Bailout, because there's nowhere else you can give your money, and it's recycled. Like once most people come back, as contrary to the propaganda, people come back. They want to try their case.
They want to show up and be innocent and leave. And that money returns and is recycled forever, freeing people. So there's like, I just want to thank NeeNee in particular. I know NeeNee is a frontline worker, putting your life, on the line every day. And I don't like to say hero because it's not always, it's heroic, but it's also people who are on the front lines are what I see as like economic hostages sometimes, where the reality is putting someone in danger, not of their choice. But I just want to like both appreciate you in both ways and still somehow how you're able to do this kind of work. And I'm going to move to our next panelist. Thank you, NeeNee. I want to move to our next. Thank you. Move to our next panelist, Stephen Lurie. I met Stephen actually, and a bunch of Never Again Action folks in Elizabeth, New Jersey, when they stood in front of ICE facility and blocked it and literally shut it down, risking their bodies. And also I think it was really scary even for me, who's pretty seasoned. I've been arrested for many things in activism, but this was especially risky because there hasn't been much of a history of what happens when you block a federal kind of thing like this and all the other laws and risks at play when you're doing something like that. And I urge you all to check out Never Again Action. And Stephen is very integral to that work, and in fact has I would love for him to introduce himself and then also talk about some of the work that Never Again Action has been doing that has been adjusted because of COVID and actually in my view even more powerful and timely.
Thanks so much for having me. My name's Stephen Lurie. I work on campaigns and strategy at Never Again Action, which is a Jewish-led mobilization to end detention and deportation and fighting for legalization for all undocumented folks in this country. And as Raf mentioned, Never Again Action's a pretty new movement, started less than a year ago and had really been focused on taking in-person direct action and trying to put folks in situations that were really new to them, particularly white folks, particularly allies, to try and demonstrate and increase their commitment to a fight that many people had not always seen as their fight. We are now having to pivot away from a lot of the in-person action styles that we had been using before. But I think what Raf is particularly referring to is, as of about a month ago, we really were itching to figure out how to do something. I think along with everyone else had a really quick pivot away from a lot of lofty campaign plans that we'd set out, and then in a matter of weeks understood that we were in a new reality that called for new demands, new campaigns, and new tactics. And so about a month ago, just really trying to get something out there to see if we could model what it looked like to protest and do direct action in the time of COVID. We had rummaged through a lot of the examples of tactics that Nadine and others have used before and put out there and have been around for a long time, and decided to try and model a car action, also in New Jersey. And along with partners there, we tried to pull off, honestly, what wasn't a great first attempt. We planned it really hastily and got folks out there, but the point of urgency was really trying to get people out into space and away from the isolation that I know a lot of people have been feeling and powerlessness behind their computers. And then we replicated that with a lot more people and a lot more partners that Sunday, just a couple days later. And since then, along with other partners and groups in the immigrant rights movement and beyond, we've helped pull off about 36 car protest direct actions in the last month. And that's basically been what we've been focusing on, and I can talk about positives and negatives and insights from that experience, but really trying to offer people some sort of opportunity to get out there, to get active, and to try and advance the demands that we know we all need to advance right now.
It's incredible. One thing I also really respected about Never Again Action work is it was always also led by folks on the front line of it. So they teamed up with groups like Cosecha and others who are made up of frontline immigrant communities, and just watching that bond that formed in real life, face to face, now kind of flourishing in this era when we're so far apart, is really, really powerful. And also both NeeNee's and your works, ability to pull from ancestors, right? That power is extremely moving, especially right now when all of us have a newfound or maybe rediscovered or amplified sense of our bond with our family and our histories right now at home, looking through albums, talking to, struggling with maybe parents or grandparents who are in the hospital, or all of those kind of struggles. So the ancestral piece of it is also very, very powerful right now. In particular, when I was in Elizabeth, one video I took of one of your arrestees, she just basically said, I said, "Are you proud of yourself of doing this, of what you've done today?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know what I feel about myself, but I know my great grandparents would be proud. My great grandparents would be proud." And I'm like, "Who were they?" And so they were partisans hiding in the jungle during World War II. They were Jews, and they armed themselves and they defended themselves, and they would be proud of me today. And people I shared that with cried, and when I posted it, it became viral. And right now, just that visual creative power of drawing through our past from any culture, and we are the survivors of that, and using that as a creative kind of starting point when deciding how to do stuff right now is really, really powerful. And thank you, Stephen. That was really, and people should look up the Never Again Action work out there. It's incredible. And our next panelist is Nadine Block. Nadine, I feel like I've never met Nadine personally, except everyone I know, including myself, has read and studied and follows Nadine's work. And that is because Nadine's work is the Chief Existential Officer of Beautiful Trouble, which I love that title, and is an artist, a nonviolent action practitioner, an organizer, a trainer, and many, many things, but also the contributor and creator of the book Beautiful Trouble, which is a toolbox for what we're doing now, right? So Nadine's work has been to go around the world and see these kind of imaginative, creative ways to move people and document them in a really powerful way. But I'm going to let Nadine introduce herself here.
Thanks, Raf, and thanks. It's just been really great to be on this panel and listen to Nene and Stephen and Sia and hear these stories from all over the place. They're reflective of what happens, of us coming together and harnessing our power, our people power. For me, yes, I've been doing this work a long time. Part of the collective Beautiful Trouble that did start off as a book, but now has been in the world as much more than that, and as a great resource for people to harness our collective power, our collective thinking, our passion, and our energy for making significant change and transforming the world that we live in. So really glad to be here. Yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot of really cool things out there. I saw, his name was mentioned before, Brett Banditelli's work with 5 for 15. I've seen images of trucks, completely covered with the stories of workers showing up in front of McDonald's and fast food places. Really exciting kind of work that's really raising the bar, including the Move On work and on the lawn of Congress, where you have hundreds and thousands, I think, placards 6 feet apart from each other with people's stories about needing protective gear who don't have it. And that incredible image online going viral. And this is a campaign by my friend Mohammed Khan at Move On. And just watching us see these limitations and pivot in ways. What are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. So Beautiful Trouble, as you mentioned, we're in the business of having people not just tell their stories as we know are some of the framework, some of the kernels of the work that we do together, but also taking the lessons, teasing the lessons of those stories out so that we can use them in many other contexts. And when we look at this, about a month ago now, myself and Ray and the crew from Beautiful Trouble put together a whole big picture of what do we do now? What does protest look like in the time of pandemic? What are the essential guiding principles, theories, tactics that could be accessible to us? People can access that on one of our partner websites, Waging Nonviolence. I've put a plug in for them. They're an incredible news source for people power in this moment, wagingnonviolence.org. And so when we look at this, we see that there's some basic essential things. We are definitely in the phase where we have to make the invisible visible, right? And whether it's the collapse and the actual dysfunction of our system that didn't just happen with COVID, right? COVID is a virus. The actual crisis is capitalism and the system, the extractive, oppressive systems that we live in that prevent people from living their full lives. So we need to make sure that people are doing the things like putting out pictures of the workers who are harmed, frontline communities that are harmed. We need to expose those things, and whether it's through giant projections, we're seeing them happen all over the world. There was an incredibly powerful one happening with videos of frontline workers from the National Health Service in Britain calling on Boris Johnson himself, just recovering from the COVID, to actually provide protective equipment for the healthcare workers. We saw, and this has been a traditional thing that we've done all over. And of course, we have done and need to do safe in-person action. And when we do those things, like we're wearing protective gear, we're standing 6 feet apart in Shutdown DC, and people should check out our Earth Day to May Day plans at shutdowndc.org. Just yesterday, we were in front of Jeff Bezos' house in Washington, D.C., holding a banner in support of Athena Network and the workers at Amazon who are protesting. And a couple of days before that, it was the 20th anniversary of the World Bank IMF International Monetary Fund actions in Washington, D.C. And we have been protesting and demanding cancellation of debt for impoverished nations across the world. And there was an online spoof that was translated into quite a bit of context in person inside the World Bank and IMF meetings. And we have insider reports that it dominated news conference and questioning like that. And so we call on people to think strategically in this moment, really, and who you can work with. Find someone to think with who can support you. Do an accurate assessment of the risks involved. This is always the case of how do we think about what we can do in this moment, make sure that we're having realistic things that we want to accomplish. Is it to express our anger? Is it to bring in more people to understand the problem? If we want to do rent strikes, if we're going to do mutual aid, how do we make those things actually build towards a greater action that we can have together to transform this system that's not functioning and hasn't been functioning for a long time? So there's been a lot going on, and I encourage people to check out the resources. Beautiful Trouble's Facebook page would give you a lot of background on that.
Beautiful Trouble has been such a valuable resource to people doing this kind of work, where it's not only that you could go through it and see examples of what you could do, it's actually like a generative exercise. So you could read through it and see these actions, and you will automatically start feeling ideas of your own and how it applies to your work. A lot of people who join us right now on Organizing 2 stuff, what's really powerful about the audience of Organizing 2.0 is that they're real world folks inside organizations that could do powerful things that may not have the resources, may not have the training, may not have the will in leadership to take any kind of risks or do anything very differently. And here is a space where for years, the organizers of Organize 2.0 have given them the tools to convince people about what is powerful, what is useful. So I hope people come away from this talk here with just like, of course, the inspiration from the remarkable panelists, and also like how these ideas are formed. And if you notice the pattern between all of the folks speaking and their campaigns, they are led by the people most impacted. They are things that are rooted in very basic principles that don't matter if you're online or offline. You got to go and you boil down where the stress points are, where the power is. And I think another tool that I always tout everywhere I go is out of Oakland. It's called the Center for Story-Based Strategy. If you go there and you do any of their exercises, Battle of the Stories or anything like that, any power analysis, you can bring to your organization not only an alignment of like what you're there to do, but once you have that alignment, it's going to open up so many creative ideas, and resources like this and talks like this and organizations like Organize 2.0 are integral in helping craft that. So what I see here right now is a lot of activists out there are going to be doing very new things outside. And this is only the beginning. Just like all of those actions listed in the Beautiful Trouble book, it's almost just like seeds for what's next. And right now, what we're talking about, what people are doing on lawns, the cacerolazo, pots and pans actions people are now making digital, which comes from Latin American tradition and of protest and sometimes support, depending on how you do it. And all of these kind of building opportunities here are just seeds for what comes next. So the more we do it, and someone mentioned earlier, like I think it was Stephen, just do it. And it's going to fail. It's not going to be right away very popular. But people, like my grandma always used to tell me, stop asking for help. People help someone who are already pushing a boulder up a hill. So push that boulder up a hill versus hang out on the street with a sign like, help me do this. Start pushing that boulder up a hill. People are going to stop their car and they're going to help you maybe as much as they can 6 feet away, but they're going to help you with it. And a lot of resources here are going to be shared on the chat and the tool and questions. And if you look any one of us up, you'll find our contact too. And we're happy to help with things. I wanted to ask you something that's really bothering me lately about seeing some of these kind of creative actions outside in the world by the right wing. So there's things that we are sharing here today. There's things the book shares. There's things we share on Twitter that are very effective to emotionally get people moving and activated to give or to act. And now I'm seeing the right kind of doing these car protests, doing these kind of things. And I'm wondering, like, what you think, like, what's your philosophy when you get asked, like, hey, maybe we should just keep this under wraps and not, like, share these kind of ideas with the world? Like, what's your philosophy there?
Okay, yeah, there's so much to talk about in so little time. So first of all, I want to just tie up the thought about where you get support from. And I really do want to plug Beautiful Trouble actually has a card deck. And you can order this and get it delivered to your house still. Our groups are still working at that. And this will really help you think about what can make your work effective and give you a ton of ideas. So just a little plug for Beautiful Trouble's card deck, because it will help people who are watching take their ideas and crystallize them. Secondly, I want to say for folks who are watching, while it is great just to start by doing something, also look for people who are already doing the work. Rent strikes and housing justice and closing detention centers and freeing people, the decarceration movement, and all these things are not brand new. People have been working on this forever. And, myself coming out of the anti-nuclear, environmental, anti-corporate globalization struggles, these struggles started other places, and they're started by first frontline communities, indigenous communities who've been fighting for their lives forever. And so take their leadership and don't think that you have to start everything new. Take the leadership from what's already happening in your community. It's also a really basic principle. Now, getting onto this other thing about what do we do about the right wing stealing our great ideas. I think that our job is to make revolution and transformation irresistible. I mean, Tony K. Bambara said it, right? Our job is to make revolution irresistible. And our key to building people power, we know the keys to success. And one is to work in solidarity, right? To work in unity, to build our numbers. Numbers are really important. So we ever want to encourage people to join us, hoping that we can actually help people see that their work against humanity and against equality is not going to serve them. And that is part of our job with making these problems visible to them and making them felt personally. I've heard Adrienne Marie Brown say that change happens at the speed of trust. So in this moment, when we do mutual aid work, when we actually help people meet their needs on a daily basis, we build trust, and sometimes at a speed that's quicker than normal. Things are moving in a really interesting way, kind of a warp speed now in this moment of pandemic. And we need to think about, as organizers, as activists, we need to think about how, and as artists, we put out a vision of a better world that is possible for people who maybe can't see that vision. And we encourage people to trust each other and build community, learn how to make those decisions together, learn how to do consent-based decision process, and learn how to govern ourselves. I mean, this is basic, radical, from the root process. And then take our creative, cultural backgrounds and use that to make sure that we do compelling, irresistible, and actually disruptive action. So in this moment, at this particular moment in the world, we're all looking at what can we do that is really, in fact, disruptive? How do we stop another complete bailout of the corporations in the United States? That CARES Act was just a massive power shift, once again, from the people to the corporations. This cannot continue. And some of us are really exhausted because we've been doing this our whole lives, right? It's not the time to stop. We can take a break, but what we need to do is figure out how to keep going, how to bring more people in, how to expose more people to the actual problems within the system in this moment when the veil has been lifted off this apocalypse, right? And so sort of a broad way of answering, but work together, do your thinking about what you need to take greater risk and what that risk is, how we can ameliorate it, take care of each other, and then work together to build a better future.
Yeah, thank you for that. A lot of us are framing this as activists do, where we're focusing on where the trouble is, right? And the trouble, of course, is being described as, oh my God, we're limited. We're so much more limited in our way that we can organize now. But if you also think about it on the other side, our targets are also limited. So they can't hide. They're relying on digital right now too. They're relying on all of these bottlenecks created right now. And guess where we get to meet them? At those bottlenecks, right? So they have, like right now, Jeff Bezos, for example, is all over Instagram as a person, like proud of what he's doing. And because he can't go and speak and meet people as he normally does. So now he's trying to pivot to digital himself. So he's also limited. So we're both limited and we're both meeting each other in there. And then I think we can also lean on our lawmakers to actually create more pressure points, for example, for our creativity and for our actions. For example, we have a right as people to meet and speak to them and address them. And right now we cannot exercise that right. So where is the law that requires them to do virtual office hours every day on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever? Where is that law? Should we be pushing a law like that so that we recreate the place that we need to disrupt things, that we need to be heard, that we need to make all of this move? So I'm extremely excited by this panel, and thank you everybody so much for everything. And I want you to use the hashtag org20 on Twitter and on Facebook to share kind of your thoughts on it, and also click on it and reshare things that people are saying, and also find us that way because we're all using it. So it's hashtag ORG20 on all the social medias. And thank you, everyone. I hope everyone out there stays safe and healthy and connected.
The CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies is the 25th and newest school under the CUNY umbrella. Dedicated to public service and social justice, the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies offers undergraduate and graduate degrees in the areas of labor studies and urban studies, and certificate programs in labor relations, public administration and public policy, healthcare policy and administration, and community leadership. We pride ourselves on being an institution that brings together activists and academics. Find out more at slu.cuny.edu.